where you are. Yes, sir.
This is Appetite for Distortion.
Welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode number 319. My name is Brando, and this is going to be a totally 80s episode. Yes, it's a GN'R flavored podcast, so we spent a lot of our time in the 80s, but as you know, with our 6 degrees of GN'R bacon, we can go anywhere. But today, with our two guests, we're going to spend a lot of time in the 80s. Coming up later, these interviews kind of presented themselves to me, and as a fan, not just of Guns N' Roses, hey, I like Loverboy. Come on. Working for the Weekend, Turn Me Loose, that's in my main playlist, right next to Shackler's Revenge and Paradise City. Always, I really do, 80s pop rock. I do. GN'R, obviously my favorite band, hard rock band. I'm doing a podcast about them, but still, a chance to talk to some other big bands from that era to see if there is a Guns N' Roses connection. It's going to be fun. So later on in the show, lead singer of Loverboy, Mike Reno. Yes. So we're going to talk to him not just about, it's a big tour, which we're also we're going to talk about. It's going to be Styx, REO Speedwagon, and Loverboy all over the U.S. So that tour is going to be fun. In my neck of the woods, New York, they're coming to Jones Beach, so you can check either of those bands' websites for all the dates in your neck of the woods. But not just with, we're going to talk about the tour with Mike Reno. We're going to talk about Loverboy and things that I'm curious about. I'm going to try to ask a unique question about how he feels about the Chris Farley, the very famous Chris Farley sketch with Patrick Swayze, of course, working for the Weekend. You know it. It's like it might be the most popular Saturday Night Live sketch of all time. So if you haven't seen it, just pause it and watch it, and then listen to the Mike Reno interview. But first, I had an opportunity to interview JY, James Young, the guitarist of Styx. That is right. Not just interview him, kind of work with him. So part of it, if you've been a fan of this podcast, yes, I work for iHeartRadio and Premier Radio Network. So what I'm doing with JY is taking him around the country via phone to promote this big tour. So I'm his tour producer. So we're going to all over the country, different states, patching him into different radio stations, and I'm last on the list. So after he's done maybe 10 or so interviews, I'm up next. So later on the podcast, Mike Reno of Loverboy, but first, JY of Styx. All right, JY. So you have the list in front of you, the schedule in front of you, correct?
Yeah, we got one more to go, right?
Yeah. So you know my name? So you see Brandon Weissler right there? That's me.
All right, hang on. Well, unfortunately, I've got it on my computer, and
oh, that's okay. Well,
and it keeps failing on me here.
Okay, well, I guess that's my job. So you'll laugh at this at the end. So your next interview is with the Appetite for Distortion podcast on iHeartRadio with me. Actually, I'm your
great.
Yeah, I'm your next interview.
Actually, my iPhone doesn't fade, so
that's okay.
Look at my iPhone, I see it here. Yeah, Appetite for Distortion podcast, Brandon Weissler.
That's me. So I'm your last interview. So I know you've been talking for an hour. I won't keep you too long. I guess appreciate your time.
I can go on forever if you need me to.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that. I guess that kind of segues into the first question. After all these years, you've done thousands of interviews. Do you still like doing them? And you can be honest.
I think because I've been here from the beginning, I have a broader perspective on everything. Tommy's been around. He came in pretty early on. And he was, he obviously helped actually lift us to the top level. John Sherlewski was a talented guy, and he just had his differences with Dennis DeYoung, and he quit and then kind of wanted to come back, but Dennis wouldn't let him back. So God bless that man. He did some great stuff, wrote some great stuff, and played the 12-string on Sweet Man of Blue, which I couldn't do. And so he's fond in my memories, but, it's showbiz and things happen.
Yes, they do happen. But it's interesting for me, who I've been here for an hour. We've been talking for an hour, connecting you to different stations all across the United States, as of course we're promoting the Styx REO Speedwagon tour with Loverboy. And you may be surprised. I don't know how young I sound to you, but those bands, you have always been in my playlist since I've been able to, buy CDs or download music. So when you go to shows, because you've mentioned the last interview you did, you were kind of teasing about perhaps the age of your audience. Are you surprised? Because there's got to be all ages that go to these shows. Is it just, the veteran Styx fans, if I can call it that? Do you go and do they bring their kids? So what's the audience like when you go out to a Styx show now, from your perspective?
Well, this is not like where the F-bomb is getting dropped every other sentence from the stage, and the bands we play with aren't doing that either. So there's not that, the sense of trying to be more outrageous than the next guy. That was part of the deal. Thank you, Gene Simmons. Going back, but now it's really about people want to come to hear the music, and some of us have children, some of us have grandchildren. I think we've sort of mellowed, and there's no reason. People come to hear the music performed as close to the record as they can, but with a little live pizzazz to go and a light show to go with it. So it's really like a great evening out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we've become a better live act. The more you do it, the more little you find. Every night there's just some little move you sort of say, I'm going to try this tonight, and if it works, great. Then it becomes part of the show. If it doesn't work, don't do that again. But you do, that their trial and error over time really helps fine tune and hone the show. So it's just we get out there and we know what we're doing. And a drummer like Todd Zuckerman, who is in theory, with these reader polls, he's among the best drummers on the world, if not the best. And to have him there doing what he does, and then Lawrence Gowan, who was, obviously took the place of Dennis, but Lawrence is he's actually a more highly skilled keyboardist. He didn't write the songs he sings here, but because he'll sing Dennis's songs, but people, he does a really good job of singing them. He's got a great voice, a great high voice, so he's part of the six harmonies that that's the big guitar, keyboard, drum sound, along with the big vocal sound, and that's who we are. That's what we do, and the replacement parts have just kind of all added to that.
I mean, yeah, it's great being a family friendly. There's nothing wrong with being family friendly audience, and I guess I have to ask about the reason why I kind of asked about a potential younger audience, because I grew up, listening to classic rock, being on classic rock radio. I remember there was an entire weekend dedicated to the Styx where we played the Grand Illusion, in its entirety on WPDH in Poughkeepsie when I was there. But I also grew up with a lot of references in TV shows and movies. So I'm just curious if I can run a couple past you and just your opinion on them, and just wondering maybe where you were. Like, I was young when South Park was new. And Cartman, at the early episodes, it might have been the first season, when he couldn't hear Come Sail Away without finishing it. Like, if somebody sang the first few bars, he would have to finish it. You have to go all the way through.
It's like when you hear the first part of that song, Come Sail Away by Styx. If I hear the first part of that song, I have to finish it. So I'm curious,
where were you, I guess, when you first watched it? Because South Park now is a legendary show, but at the time it was new, it was crude. Anything you can tell us about South Park and Cartman?
Well, it wasn't. South Park wasn't a big hit in our house so much. I mean, it was outrageous in the ways you mentioned, and it was cutting edge in that regard. We're on cable now. We can show naked bodies. We can do this. We can do that. But took it in a different, an animated direction was kind of. And some people truly appreciated it. A lot of people truly appreciated it, and that kind of became a thing that Come Sail Away to Cartman. We should thank whoever came up with that notion, because that obviously helped promote that song and promote this band.
It did, and it just made me now. Yes, I can listen to it separately. I guess it depends on the kind of mood. If I'm in the car, a long ride, I can rock out to, of course, Styx. But sometimes it just reminds me of it reminds me of South Park, and I just get a chuckle in my head. And same thing with, have you ever spoken with Adam Sandler and his, I don't know if it's an obsession with Styx, but Renegade was used in Billy Madison. There was references in Big Daddy. Just curious if I got to imagine he really is a Styx fan.
I finally met Adam. I can't remember exactly how it came about. I think we invited him. It was a year we were actually opening for Boston. Tom Schultz didn't want to go out, but we thought a manager. I didn't mind opening for Boston because I knew that they're not. They don't have Tommy Shaw in that band. It's Tom Scholes playing and Brad Delp singing, and the rest of the band is all really good players. So it was played somewhere in Los Angeles, and Adam brought his wife out, and he brought one of his comedian buddies. Oh, I can't think of the guy's name. Kevin
Nealon?
Kevin.
Kevin Nealon?
No.
No, not Kevin Nealon. Oh, Kevin. Oh my God, the guy from King of Queens. Why is that not coming?
Yeah, I think that's him.
Kevin James. There you go.
Kevin James, yeah. And so those two guys were there with their wives, and I didn't really. He came backstage, but just briefly. But it was, very friendly, and he says, "You guys make great music. It's fantastic. Love it." He was very friendly and very, very like a regular guy that's just got a lot of talent, but he's not going to lord it over you. He's not, weird enough so he doesn't know how to deal with social situations. He just seemed like he's a regular guy that was in the right place at the right time with the right stuff, which is how I kind of view my talent. Yeah, I have a certain amount of talents, but without being in the right place at the right time with the right stuff, you'll go unrecognized for the rest of your life. So
yeah, it's crazy how that works out. Absolutely, the blue collared man, but there's a lot of them, but not everybody gets to record a song about it and do that. And I love when you see Adam Sandler out. He's always just in like sweatpants and a t-shirt, like he just dresses like the everyman.
He seemed like a really nice guy.
Have you ever gotten an offer to? Because obviously Styx music is used not just for movies but for commercials. But was there ever an offer like, you know what? No, I don't want Styx music to be associated with this project. Has that happened?
I think there was a couple of sort of real edgy things that might have had a lot of sort of soft porn maybe even, and they wanted to use some of Dennis's songs, and he said absolutely not. So. But beyond that, I think anybody that that's going to have anything that's in something that's not, because we are a mainstream band as a collective. So I think that a lot of times others, Tommy, they wouldn't call me, because Tommy's a writer on so many of the things, and I don't write that many popular songs. So Tommy probably gets a lot more calls, and Dennis obviously has got a lot more calls about using certain things, but. It's all been good.
Well, I'm glad we never got Mr. Roboto, the adult film. That might have ruined the band for me, or too much time on our hands instead. Let me ask. So, as I alluded to, yes, I work for iHeartRadio and Premier Radio Networks. That's what I've done this tour with you this morning as we're promoting this really fun tour, and I'm excited to see the three bands go out together because I love the '80s. As a cliche as that sounds. But if you notice, the title of the podcast is Appetite for Distortion. So that's right. We use a Guns N' Roses theme. Everybody and their mother has a podcast, but I try to make mine a little different. So I try to find the 6 degrees of GN'R Bacon instead of Kevin Bacon. That's what I call it. So what's the 6 degrees of between Styx and Guns N' Roses? And maybe you can help me out, and perhaps you have your own stories. But the only one I can really find was Tommy Shaw and Slash have recorded together. Have you ever met any of the Guns N' Roses guys? I guess any connections that I wouldn't know about?
So.
Okay. Then let me ask this. Then.
I really was. It took me a little while to get, because the grunge the '90s came along and kind of replaced the big classic rock bands like ourselves, and then all of a sudden we couldn't get arrested at radio with our '91 release, Edge of the Century, which Tommy was not on. Tommy was off with Damn Yankees and Nugent at that point in time, but but then the Seattle sound. No Excuses. Who is that? No Excuses.
Allison Chains? That's Allison Chains, No Excuses.
Yeah, Allison Chains was a band that I sort of got into, and Nirvana I was less of a Nirvana guy, but Soundgarden.
Okay.
Spoon Man.
Nice.
And that caught my ear in a big way. And and Dave Grohl obviously has gone on to do many great things in many good ways. So, I mean, that man you have to appreciate everything he's done. As a talented guy.
As a Jewish person.
Who plays drums and guitar.
I know. And as a Jewish person, I love that he does the 8 Nights of Hanukkah, where he just covers great Jewish rock artists like Kiss or David Lee Roth and the Ramones. So, yeah, you kind of answered that a little bit, because I want to ask, as you with these big hits that you have, and obviously still these beloved songs like, Come Sail Away or Renegade, Mr. Roboto, but then in comes, you have the hair metal, but what about Guns N' Roses? Do you remember before grunge came in? Because that was kind of the segue, a lot of people say, between, the Poisons and then Nirvana, because it was harder. Do you remember hearing Appetite for Destruction the first time, or Welcome to the Jungle on the radio? Where were you, I guess, in 1987 when that came out?
Well, I was probably driving in my car listening to rock radio, and Styx. I think that was kind of the solo album era. 81 was Paradise Theater. The next album after that was.
I could bring up your discography.
Crystal Ball was 75. So Paradise Theater was 81. So I think that was kind of a breakup there, and that's where I put a solo band together. And we all kind of put solo bands together, and then I think we did a '96 tour without 80. I think that was kind of a reunion tour in '96.
Yeah, because I'm just looking
at
the
late '80s, early '90s are a blur.
Because I'm looking at the ever trusted Wikipedia, and in 1983. Sorry to say that was the year I was born. Kilroy.
That was Roboto.
Yeah. And then 1990 was the Edge of the Century. So, there was a down period. So, I guess nothing sticks out, or perhaps as a guitar player, when you first heard Slash, do you have an opinion of his guitar style and playing as...
Well, for me, who saw Hendrix live 5 times.
Wow.
And saw Clapton with Cream live, saw Jethro Tull live, saw the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Once I saw the Mahavishnu Orchestra, with Jan Hammer on the keyboards and John McLaughlin on guitar, Jerry Goodman on violin, that was Billy Cobham on drums and Rick Gretsch who was there. And but that I just said, this is really, I tried to move my skills along and figure out how those guys. Wow, how does he play that? That was kind of a lesson for me, actually, and that's why I did a solo record with Jan Hammer. But he had just done one with Neil Schon before that, so I was the next victim with Jan, and that album was called City Slicker, and we used some automated drums on there, which is what he used on the Miami Vice theme. But yeah, I mean, so when all those guitar players came along in the grunge era, to me, nobody could outdo the Mahavishnu Orchestra musically.
Okay.
And so, but none of, I think most of the guitar playing that I heard in the grunge era was all, you're just putting notes together, and who can play faster doesn't matter as much anymore. And ultimately, I guess maybe I stopped worrying about, the craziest thing is Jerry Goodman can actually play circles around me, playing real fast on the guitar. And he was at one show we did, 2007, out in L.A., and he just, Jerry's kind of a tortured soul. His mother's second chair violin in the Chicago Symphony. And I think Jerry he had some drug issues. I love that guy, and I really wish him well, and I hope he's found some peace. But my God, what a gifted man! So I stopped, lead guitar players after that. Really, Eddie Van Halen clearly was, and I've sat with Eddie a couple times.
Do you then with that then? Because it is interesting your perspective, and you kind of gave me a unique answer, which I appreciate. How you group in grunge era. I mean, maybe Guns N' Roses isn't. Yeah, some people my age or younger might view it as 80s hair metal even, or maybe like your perspective again, somebody who saw Jimi Hendrix live and you see it as a grunge. They're part of that movement, so it is very fascinating. But then let me ask before I get you out of here about Eddie Van Halen. Can you talk? Do you have a story about him? Sitting down with him? Anything you could share?
Well, it's Ricky Phillips in our band is a guy you should interview at some point in time. Nobody was really chasing him for interviews, but he was at the center of so many phenomenal things. Even though he was a sideman, basically, he's a great bass player and a competent background singer. Ricky's stepsister, Ricky's stepsister is Kathleen Kennedy, who's Spielberg's main producer throughout his whole career. So Ricky's been he's got one ear, in the film business at the top level, and was invited to do music for films and this, that, and the other thing. But he just said Eddie's kind of a shy guy. And when I finally realized that, the Van Halen brothers were dark complected because their mother is from some place called South Molucca. Their dad is Dutch. So they were very dark complected when they were younger, and I think they got treated like they were less than white in white circles as young people. So I think there was that drove Eddie, I'm sure, home to play his guitar all day long. That's how he became so great. But that's something I never even heard, because Eddie, to me, to be with him, the last time I sat down with him, he treated me like an old friend, and I was sort of just charmed, and he's a shy guy. I'm not shy, but he's kind of an introvert, and then he pours all that energy into the guitar.
Yeah, okay.
And but those Van Halen records, as rock records, they just run with the devil. So many strong ones that they had for me. And
is there an Eddie Van Halen riff you wish you thought of? I mean, there could be a lot, but is there one that stands out? Like, oh man.
I can't offhand. I can't really think about that.
Okay, I don't want to pressure you.
Van Halen in a while, but nothing comes to mind right away.
Okay.
All I know is he could play as fast as the guy in John McLaughlin and Mahavishnu, and then ultimately I can play that fast. But it's still all about what context are you playing in, and what message you're trying to convey, and once your skill level gets to a certain point, it's you have to still have some musical context to use it in, and use it judiciously in.
I'm glad that you're still putting your talents on display.
You should interview Ricky Phillips.
I'm writing that down. I think that's a great idea. To get the more.
He's seen everything, everywhere, and Ricky worked. He was in bands. He was in the Babies. He was in Bad English. He was in Coverdale Page, so he worked with Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
David Coverdale, obviously, who was part of
Whitesnake. He's been on the show a couple times. Yeah.
And Richard Blackmore's, he was in Richie Blackmore's band, and I love Richie Blackmore as a guitarist too. But Ricky worked and lived on the Sunset Strip for like a number of years, right at the heyday of the Sunset Strip.
Okay, all right.
So he could. Nice. He's the one that should write the book.
And at Sunset Strip,
but he probably won't.
And he might have a tighter 6 degrees of GN'R bacon if he was on the Sunset Strip. So, all right, if I get him, I'll credit you as being producer for that tour, for that interview.
Well,
so thanks. I'm glad you're hitting the road. REO Speedwagon, Styx, Loverboy. I mean, it's just a great time. I know you're all over the United States, but for me specifically, the closest is Jones Beach. Out on Long Island, which is a really great venue. I've grown up seeing many a classic show there. thanks for your time, and just thanks for being a great, I guess, coworker today as we did this radio tour together.
I feel like I'm more able to articulate things than my bandmates in many ways. Although Tommy will come up with some stuff that surprises me, but I sat in the studio. I had my own studio, so I learned all the technology, how to record. But I also was trained to start piano. Everyone in my family trained in piano at age 5, played clarinet in the high school band, inherited from my older sister from 8th grade through high school. And then I loved Jimmy Smith and Brother Jack McDuff on the Hammond organ. I have a bunch of those records. And, of course, Deep Purple, John Lord, that solo he plays on Hush. I love Deep Purple's version of Hush much better than Billy Joe Royal's. Basically, this is that organ solo. So,
great song.
So I could talk forever, and we can talk again if you want sometime.
I appreciate that, JY. I'll let you go, rest those pipes, and I'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Yeah, he could have kept going. I mean, thankfully, I feel guilty. I gave myself, I think, because I was the last slot, more time than the other radio stations had 10 minutes. I told him 10 minutes, but he kept going. And it's my job when it's another radio station on, and if they're going over the 10 minutes, I got to cut him off. So I can't cut myself off. But this one, I could get cut off, so I'm not going to go too long with it. Mike Reno of Loverboy. Who would have ever thought? I mean, maybe get a guy from Styx on a GN'R themed podcast. But Loverboy? Let's find out. So whereas I was running JY's radio tour, patching into different radio stations, calling them up, my coworker Mike has to call me with Mike Reno on Loverboy. Hey, Mike?
All right, you there?
I am.
We hear you.
Cool.
You're kind of low.
I am low. How about now?
Better. Yep, you're good.
Ooh,
all right.
Now he's high.
All right, you'll have till top of the hour. Go ahead.
What an appropriate... If you only knew me, Mike, but no comment.
Yeah, right. No. Hey, listen, I know about high, but I'm in a rock band. Forget about it. It's going to be fun.
Oh, awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time today. And I got to ask, because I was speaking earlier with JY of Styx. Not only did I interview him, I was running his radio tour. You've done thousands of interviews over the years. Do you get tired of it? How do you look at interviews all these years later and perhaps the same questions? Do you enjoy them?
You know what it is for me is I have a lot of great memories. I mean, I feel honored, and it's a privilege really to be in a rock band at my age and just really enjoying what we do. I'll never look that in the face of, I'll never say this is a negative thing at all. And, sometimes, you don't want to talk about yourself, but there's a lot of cool stories, and there's a lot of cool things that have happened to us, and we've met a lot of cool people along the way. So I don't mind talking about it. I really don't.
Very cool. Well, that makes my job easier, of course. It's interesting. I don't know if I sound young, perhaps, because I know this is what I was talking to JY about. Because I'm 38, and I know a lot of, the stations you're talking to might be of the upper demographic, but I've worked in classic rock radio my entire life, so it was never an issue. Like, Loverboy was always on my playlist with anything that I grew up with, even though I was born in 83. I'm sorry, I don't know if that dates me a little bit, but in addition to just growing up with...
She was older than that, Brando.
I know, I was afraid to say it, but the reason is because not only, I grew up on your music through radio, but also through cultural references. So I'm sure you get all the time asked about Chris Farley and SNL, but I guess I got to ask, do you remember where you were when you first watched that skit and what went through your mind?
Oh, God, that is a fabulous question. And you know what? As soon as you said it, it came to me immediately. I don't remember the city, I honestly don't, but I do remember it was after the show, we were home in the hotel room, and what I like to do is pack the night before, because I can't sleep very well if I got to pack in the morning. I'm not a morning person. So what I do is I put the suitcase out, I start folding my stuff. Of course, the stuff I wore to the gig, I'm hanging to dry because it's soaking wet. So I'm going to pack that very last first thing in the morning. But the majority of stuff gets packed that night. And I got Saturday Night Live on. And I didn't even know this was going to happen. So this is a good question. So I'm standing there, folding clothes, probably sucking back a cold one, after show stuff. And boom, the skit comes on, and they start doing this thing, and it's this big guy dancing, and he's dancing better than the dancer. And I'm going, this is insane. And then all of a sudden they have this dance-off, and they're using my song. I almost peed my pants. I just was laughing so hard. I thought, and it's a classic piece. I mean, they're still playing it. I couldn't believe what was happening. I was like, I got to pinch myself, and I felt like really honored and all those things. But it was just fun, just fun.
It's arguably the greatest sketch in Saturday Night Live history, and yeah. Chris Farley, Patrick Swayze, they made it great. But your song, that's perfect song. Do you remember when you first when first penned, Working for the Weekend? Yeah, of course you wouldn't envision this. But what did you have in mind when you first penned that song?
Well, the song was written about people getting ready to party and celebrate the weekend.
Sure.
And Paul and I were working in his apartment in Kitsilano. It's a beach community in Vancouver. People are kind of coming home with, in one hand, a box of beer, in the other hand, some their clothes were coming from the dry cleaner, their favorite shirts and stuff. And they were going to go home after work, have a few beer, put on their clothes, and they were going out for the weekend. That was the essence of the song. And the reason we wrote it was because we were on the balcony watching these people walk by one after the other, and they were just getting ready for the weekend. And as it turned out, I think the initial song was called "Waiting for the Weekend." And when I was in the studio, I just started singing "Everybody's Working for the Weekend," and the people stopped and went, "Oh my God, that's so much better!"
Oh wow!
So I remember that. I totally remember that. I remember both those things we just talked about.
Very cool. So I got to ask, because Working for the Weekend has been in my playlist since I've been able to listen to music. But I don't know if you have a schedule in front of you. We're on iHeartRadio on Q1043.com, but it's an appetite for distortion. That's what we're called, appetite for distortion. Yeah, you've been talking to rock radio all morning, but I like to be a little different. So there's a Guns N' Roses theme. So I'm just curious from your perspective, who was writing, hits and more of the lighter side of the 80s, which again I'm a fan of. What did you think of when Guns N' Roses came out? And do you remember where you were when you heard Appetite for Destruction for the first time?
Do you know what? When I heard Guns N' Roses for the first time, and this is kind of an interesting story because people may look this up. I thought it was a band from Vancouver called Prism, because the singers sing the same, really high, clean, and I thought, this is a great song by Prism. And then all of a sudden it said it was Guns N' Roses, and I went, what? Guns N' Roses? Who the hell are they? This is, right at the beginning. And of course I later realized that, I was wrong. And I think I even lost $100 on that bet. But if some of your listeners want to have a little fun, go listen to the early Prism album. They could probably find it online, I'm sure, and it'll be. I'd like to hear if any of your fans or listeners can see the difference, or can see the similarities, rather, not the difference.
So that's awesome. I've never heard that before, so I'm going to do that if my listeners don't. I don't know why they wouldn't, because that's really intriguing, especially since you bet $100. It's a lot of toonies that you got.
Yeah, I lost $100.
Do you have any, what I use, what I call 6 degrees of GN'R bacon instead of Kevin Bacon? I know you're footloose and everything, but maybe that's the 6 degrees. Do you have any connections with Guns N' Roses? Have you ever met any of the guys, come across Slash or Duff? Any other stories we might uncover from you?
Well, we're going to come up a little short on the Guns N' Roses story personally.
Okay.
I haven't had a chance to meet the guys. I would have loved to. Fantastic group, great group live. They make great records. But I personally haven't had a chance to meet the guys. But I'm looking forward to it. You say I still got something to look forward to.
Okay. All right. See, I'll take it. But I like the first 6 degrees you gave me. about the band that you really thought was Guns N' Roses from Canada. I mean, that's something I would never have discovered. So that's why I ask these questions. I want to know things that we may not know.
Sure.
Before we get out of here, just because I'm a huge fan of not just the song, but the movie, Wet Hot American Summer. And you guys were in that with Turn Me Loose. It was just used prominently throughout the film. Do you remember anything about that? You know, was it just a simple permission of using that song? Or was that also one day you're watching a movie and it comes on, you didn't know that you were going to, your song was featured in it?
Actually, Brando, I'm calling my lawyer right now. These people got to stop this stuff. Hey, listen, when anybody wants to use, and it's happened a lot this year, as a matter of fact, my agent called me from Los Angeles and said, what is this, Loverboy Day? He just had 2 requests for Loverboy songs, 2 different songs for different things, a sitcom that's coming out with one of the guys from Saturday Night Live, and then a movie which was being with Woody Harrelson in it. And I thought, isn't that great? This is before I had my first cup of coffee. I got 2 songs being put in movies and sitcoms. And, you know, it's always an honor, and I treat it with respect. And I thank my lucky stars that I'm, that this is happening to us. It's a nice thing. It keeps the songs going. Everybody remembers this stuff. So it's perfect for movies. I'm just glad it happens. Believe me.
Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure talking with you, and I'm glad not just we can hear your songs everywhere, but you're going to be playing it live all over the United States with Styx and REO Speedwagon, my neck of the woods, New York, Jones Beach, which is a great venue. So thank you, Mike, for your time, and looking forward to seeing you out on the road.
Hey, Brando, I'll see you out there.
You got it. Thank you so much, Mike and Mike.
Thanks, Brandon. See ya.
So not really a connection, but a 6 Degrees of GN'R Bacon thought. Like, I've never heard that before, that they sound like this Canadian band. The Guns N' Roses sounds like this Canadian band. I mean, for me, I had never heard of before. I know we have a lot of Canadian listeners, so I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you agree with Mike? So we uncovered a question that we never would have uncovered before if we didn't have Mike Reno of Loverboy on Appetite for Distortion. Absolutely amazing. And I appreciate those of you, yes, on this GN'R-themed, GN'R-flavored podcast. Yes, there are certain guests that talk a lot more Guns N' Roses than others, but, how are we going to get to 319, then 320, and keep going episodes? We got to get creative. And so I appreciate all of you coming along on this podcast night train ride with me. What is to come as we wrap up this podcast? Well, the band Lit is coming, and it should be 100% confirmed soon. So watch out on social media, facebook.com/the AFD show or at the AFD podcast. And hopefully, and will be the way if you want to send in questions that I'll take it for Dave Navarro and Billy Morrison. So that also should be coming up as well. I will say, because I've talked about guests that have been hard to get, and I've just never been like, okay, a guest says, no, it doesn't happen. I don't just start blasting them. And I'm not above being rejected at this stage in my life. But sometimes it gets frustrating and a little, annoying. But since I still get questions about why don't you have Tracy Guns on the show, he again said no. I really, really thought I had an opportunity recently after my successful interview, I thought, with Phil Lewis. There was no Guns N' Roses talk. I ran out of time with Phil Lewis. I got so distracted because he was so great. Talking so much LA Guns, and I've had a couple conversations with the LA Guns manager who seemed to like me, and it just seemed like it was going to happen, and he's like, it's just not going to happen. I don't know if that's directly coming from him or Tracy. It sounded like from Tracy because the way he made me feel like there was hope. So I don't know why he would give me hope and then shut it down. So I don't know if Tracy just said no again. I offered, which is weird because he's, recently again, quoted as talking about Guns N' Roses in a Ultimate Guitar guitar interview. So it's like, I think about, okay, he doesn't want to talk about Guns N' Roses anymore. He's LA Guns. He was in Guns N' Roses for not very long. I mean, long enough to help name the band. And so I was like, I'll just talk LA Guns. I'll just talk about how he spent your Hanukkah. Nothing. So whatever. I'm a little annoyed with because he seems to have a very fun personality on Twitter, and he's been responsive on Twitter. So it's just why? So that's why I appreciate people like JY and Mike Reno. They're not above any interview. They're not. They're still successful. They're touring. I understand they're 80s acts, but they are still successful, and they'll talk to anybody for long. So I don't know. I'm just maybe venting a little bit. You think? But I want to let you know. So I don't know if Tracy Guns will ever be on the show. Hopefully. And he's not even a Guns N' Roses member. And that's usually what the crux of the issue is, when it's a Guns N' Roses member that I'm trying to get back on because of perhaps some miscommunication between me and Guns N' Roses management. And I will say, if you want to hear for yourself, in context, some of the maybe controversial interviews that I've done, I've been still updating my YouTube channel daily. Not just when I have new episodes like this one, so perhaps you're listening to this on YouTube, but with highlights of all of our interviews. So, yeah, you can go back and listen to an episode that's an hour, but how about a nice little bite-sized 2-minute clip of Dr. Stephen Thaxton, Use Your Illusion chiropractor, talking about Amy Bailey, Axl's sister, coming to the rescue or trying to come to the rescue medically with cocaine. They didn't have any, numbing agents. It's a great story. So it's on YouTube. You can listen to it in full context, and that specifically, it was told to me by a mutual friend that after that came out, and I guess there was clickbait with it, which is no fault of mine. You all know that, because even when I posted this story about Axl's sister, and I even put in parentheses, not what you think, trying to make it sound like Axl's sister's doing drugs. So I'm personally not a clickbait person. That's just not my style. I was told Beta LaBass complained about me for 20 minutes to a mutual friend on the phone. I mean, is he making that up? Am I making that up? Is it hyperbole? I mean, that's kind of, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but Beta called him angrily about me talking about, or a guest talking about Axl's sister. And a great story. Nothing is controversial. It's just a funny story. So if you want to hear it, if you haven't heard that story, when you hear it in context and with no clickbait, go to our YouTube channel. Same thing with Susan Holmes McKagan. When she announced that, this was before Absurd and Hard School came out, that she heard new Guns N' Roses music. And you can hear it in context where I didn't even ask her about it. I'm asking her about how fans could follow her on social media. And then she just says, like, oh, well, I've heard, I want to share this bit of news. I've heard some new GN'R. It's pretty epic. And I didn't even press her on it. What did you hear? So it's all in context. So there really is kind of almost no excuse. If people don't have to do interviews, no one has to do interviews. But when I see them doing it in other places, like, again, Tracy Guns. It's like when I get a no, and then he does an interview talking about Guns N' Roses. It's like, really, bro? Come on. I would be. We would have such a fun interview. So that I don't get. So it's just, I don't know. If you come across him, just try to convince him. Tweet him. Hey, you would be really great on the AFD podcast. And that's a normal thing for people to do when you have your favorite band. You want your radio station to play your favorite band. You tweet at the radio station, hey, please play this band. You do the same thing with guests. Hey, come on the AFD podcast. And that works. That does work a lot of times. Most recently, I think, with Rick Richards. And it was a listener who reached out on my behalf. Is he in Argentina? So these things happen. Absolutely. So that's why this podcast, it's not just my podcast, it's our podcast. You help me continue it. Absolutely. So remember, the conversations continue between the broadcasts. That's how you can get questions in. Oh, and I appreciate those of you who gave me the 6 degrees of Loverboy bacon and Styx bacon. They try to make this kind of work. So thanks. So anyone else you can think of, whether it's a tight connection to GN'R or we got to go Loverboy style, let me know. This is a fun podcast. And again, I appreciate every single one of you helping me continue and giving me a fun thing to do. Talk about my favorite band and talking to the rock stars that you and I love. So until next time, when are you going to hear the podcast? The next episode? In the words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy, you'll see it. I don't know if soon is the word.